Hi everyone, I'm Nat and I'm the head of community at Exceptional Individuals. Every Thursday we do these webinars on different subjects, and this is one that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. At Exceptional Individuals, we're always banging about the advantages of being neurodiverse, the strengths that are attached to seeing the world in a different perspective. Now, this is all well and good, but where are those advantages? We know the downsides, we know the difficulties. Most of us, myself included, live with them on a day-to-day basis. But how have those who have really made it big in life or have done great things use their neurodivergence, normally dyslexia, to their advantage? And was it one of the key factors in their success, or was it just a coincidence? And that is kind of what we're going to be looking at today. So a bit about us, even though I'm pretty certain everyone here knows already. We support the A to Z of neurodiversity. So if you're ever in doubt, get in contact. Now, the one we did last week was called the Clumsy Child Dyspraxia Trope. And this was a really interesting one because we talk about all these kind of perceived negatives, but are they true? Just like today, we're learning about the strengths of dyslexia. Where do these strengths originate from? And when the negatives, who invented them? All of these things are constructed by our society. And the more we talk about them, the more we kind of give them credibility and strength. So this is why sessions like today are really important. So first question to all of you. When you think of dyslexia entrepreneur, what words come to mind? Just, let me know. Does a certain word come to mind when you think of a dyslexic entrepreneur? Now, this could be positive, negative, neutral, whatever you like. Cool, we got creative, nice, that's a good classic one.
Professional.
Professional, yes, Rosanna, professional is a good one. I mean, for me, I think underdog, that's a word that really comes to my mind. Like kind of the Rocky Balboa of the business world, someone who defeats the odds. Because
talented,
yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because if we just say the word dyslexia, we think of all these negative words. But the second we think or we put the word entrepreneur in that sentence, we're kind of reversing the game. We're thinking of Richard Branson. We're thinking out of the box thinking, determined, creative, big picture thinker. So it's really interesting how just one word can change someone's perception from a perceived disability to a considered like USP or talent. Now, I'm going to go through some of the key things which I think really make dyslexics stand out. And rather than just tell you what the strengths of dyslexia are, I'm going to prove it. So the first one is thinking differently, right? Great minds think different. This is a real massive part of dyslexia. Now, why do people think different? Do they think different because it is part of how their brain is wired, or do they think different because of life events, way they have been perceived in society have changed their outlook? Probably it's a bit of both, the nature versus nature versus nature versus, what was that?
Nurture.
I don't know. Mine just went completely blank there.
I'm glad I can help now.
You're cool. There, I'll put you on mute now. But that was very helpful. Oh yes, we've got Anna. So nature v nurture.
Yeah.
So the first role model we're going to really kick this off with is everyone's favorite, Richard Branson. Now this guy is a massive advocate of dyslexia. He does so much to champion the cause, and he directly contributes his success to his dyslexia. Now, where to start on this one? He's one of the richest people in the world. He made his first million by 21, and he founded Virgin, as well as a whole heap of other ones. I think to date, he had like 500 ventures under his belt. And his story of how he got here is really inspirational. Like most of these, he didn't like school. He was intelligent, but he couldn't kind of jive the way that the system wanted him to. So I want to do just a little timeline of just some of his ventures. I think he controls over 400 now. Some he still owns, some he's bought, but I'm going to be focusing on the ones he's founded. And you'll hopefully be able to pick on some themes along the journey. And this is not just important for those of us who are dyslexic. This is also important for organizations, because these Richard Bransons, you are losing them. They are going off and they're making their own companies. If you're able to harness that talent, who knows what you might be able to accomplish. Nice. Shout out to Anna, who's just joined. Great to have you. So start off with, in the 60s, swinging 60s, he first attempted his business of selling Christmas trees and budgerigars. I don't know if they were at the same time. That would be an interesting combination. But either way, it failed. No one wanted his trees. No one wanted his birds. So then he was like, do you know what? I'm going to start my own student magazine. And it was called Student. And he managed to make, I think, £8,000 in terms of advertising for this magazine. 8,000 is a lot of money, but put this in perspective of the 60s. That was an insane amount of money, more money than he even needed to use for that magazine. So as a dyslexic, he decided to use his initiative, and rather put that money in his pocket, he decided to give this magazine away free. So he just gave it to everyone. People liked it, they've adapted it, and brilliant. You know, before too long, he made $50,000, well, pounds. So he's got a very entrepreneurial spirit, and he started from very kind of humble means, and he was able to tell stories through images and through networking and talking to people. Okay, what did he get up to next? In the 70s, he starts selling records by mail order. And this is, you'll see how he's changing his genre, well, his area continuously. People who are dyslexic don't stay stagnant. We go where our brains are most active, which takes our interested. So in his newspaper or his magazine Student, a lot of the adverts were for music, and people liked the music. So he thought, what about if I start selling music in my paper? And it worked. Then with that money, he made a record shop, a physical brick and mortar store where he was selling records. Then customers would come in and they'd be like, I really wish I could make my own music. So he made a record studio. So he's continuously bootstrapping, which is reinvesting his money. Then he releases Virgin Records, the first one with Virgin. Now he's already on 5 million, not doing too bad. So his technique here is investing back into his business. He is not bothered about making profit. He is bothered about creating things that he enjoys, as well as listening to his customers. And these are all things which could he have achieved without his dyslexia? You know, I don't think he would. And I think he would probably agree. Moving on to the 80s, he starts pushing it out dramatically. The thing he keeps consistent is the name Virgin because of the brand. And the name Virgin actually came about because it was from one of his first employees, because they were all new to the business. So it was like virgins. And the name kind of stuck. So he created Virgin Vision, Virgin Games, Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Holidays, Virgin Classic, like music, broadcasting, music box, all sorts. Now he did with all his money he made from Virgin Music, he decided to buy an aeroplane, because who wouldn't? And he was flying around and he just wanted to be nice and cheap and cheerful for people. But then he's like, this is fun and everything, but I actually prefer riding in hot air balloons. So he made his own air balloon company. So he owns
Virgin Trains.
Yes.
Second company, but he's not the owner anymore. Someone else just took over last year. Avanti West Coast.
Yeah, it's very, very true. And I think that comes out in the 90s. He loses his franchise for that. But I mean, that's the thing, that he's very adaptable. Like, he sees if there's a demand in the market and he tries to fill it. Like, who knew air balloons? And it worked for him. But he also did condoms. Who would have known, eh? A massive seller. So he saw a hole in the market, hopefully not a hole in this product, and he took that forward. So moving on to the 90s, we've got him doing a publishing company. He's got his radio stations. He's selling vodka and Coke, financial services, more airlines, brides. I'm hoping this isn't mail order brides. I didn't research that deep, but he's doing brides anyway. You're right, Fozana, now he's starting to do trains and he eventually loses that contract, but that's not due to any fault of his own. That is due to the procurement process. He does cosmetic, mobiles, and what he will normally do, he'll buy it, he'll build it, he'll sell it, then he'll put that money into something else. So he's continuously being innovative, continuously changing and continuously adapting. Now, he don't think this has been all sunshine and rainbows. He's had some severe financial difficulties. It got to the point where he had to sell his record company, which apparently he even cried because that was his baby. But he realized he had to do that in order to keep these other things going. So really interesting. And like I said, he still controls 400 of these companies. I think he's had like 700 in total. Moving on to 2000s, we've got Blue Airlines, we've got Virgin Energy, Virgin Cars, Virgin Galactic. And let's be honest, you do not get much cooler than creating your own rocket company. Why? He saw a need for it. He also has his own fuel company, which is for fuels of the future. Banks, media, TV channels, healthcare, and charitable giving. Now, I don't know if I can contribute this to his dyslexia or not, but he's also a very generous individual, donating loads and loads to charity. On the Virgin Isles, I don't know if he picked that just because he liked the name, but when it got like devastated by floods, he reinvested the money. Now, I'm not saying I don't love this guy. I'm just saying he's done really well for himself. And he took something which most people would perceive as a massive disadvantage, which is going to cap his potential, and turned it on its heads. Moving on to the 2000s and the 20s, he did Virgin Racing. He's got his own F1 team, the gaming, and he produces a company. And he's also got Voyages, which is already sold out. So you can go to space on his private spaceship. It's not currently functioning, but it's already in the means. So not bad, for someone who struggled a lot at school. Now, my question to all of you is, cool, impressive, but why do dyslexics make great entrepreneurs? We're going to see a really interesting stat later about the percentages, but all I'll say for now is a lot of people who are dyslexic end up being entrepreneurs, and they tend to be much more successful at entrepreneurship than they do working the 9 to 5 in a traditional organization. Why is that?
Is it because they have a more broad in imagination than someone who's probably not dyslexic?
It definitely could be. I mean, we know people with dyslexia do have really vivid imaginations, and that kind of goes across all neurodiversities. But do you think it's like, is imagination part of dyslexia, or do you think it's part of living with dyslexia?
Living with it, I think.
I think so too. A lot of it comes down to adversity, that kind of struggle of overcoming something, and that resilience and grit it teaches you along the way. They are believed to be creative, and I think they are creative, but we've got to remember creativity isn't just about arts and crafts. It's about being a problem solver. When you think, what is dyslexia at its essence? Dyslexia is about solving puzzles. In your brain, let's say you got the word cat, your brain doesn't know what the word cat is. It looks at it, it converts written word into audio in your head, and your brain converts that internal audio into meaning. So it goes through a process like an algorithm. Now, the brain struggles with that particular type, but with other problems, it's able to solve it. So some problems are really difficult. Other problems are walk in the park. So dyslexics tend to gravitate towards the problems which they find easier to solve in their brain. But those who aren't dyslexic, they have the opposite effect. So rather than seeing dyslexia as a deficit, I kind of see it as like a yin and a yang, both required in society, but both very different. We've got non-conforming, don't fit the normal company structure and environment. Yeah, absolutely. We are just as ambitious as any other person. I don't think we're particularly exceptional in that regard. But if you put us in a box and we're a big old circle, we're going to want to get out of that. And we create businesses because there's nothing else we can do. I don't want to be unemployed. We want to create our own company. We've got ambitious to overcome challenges. Absolutely. I think a lot of these people, school is some of the toughest periods of their life. Once they got over that hurdle, then it's kind of that snowball effect where you try and stop that momentum. I don't think he would stop even if he wanted to, because let's be real, a lot of the people we're going to be talking about today have more money than sense, but yet they're still going. We're continuously looking for new opportunities to move forward. Anna says creative thinking, great problem solving. Completely agree with all of you on that. So a quote that he actually says is, my dyslexia has shaped Virgin right from the very beginning, and imagination has been the key to many of our successes. It's helped me think big, but keep our message simple. So you were all completely right when you said imagination, but I really want to home in on some of the qualities that he mentioned. So he says imagination, so being able to think the impossible. Like, why can't I have my own hot air balloon company? Why can't I send people to space? Does the technology exist? Not currently, but why can't I do it? And we also got to help, it helped me think big, but keep the message simple. And this is a really good thing. People with dyslexia are really good at taking complex problems and simplifying it so it's an easy message. And easy messaging equals easy marketing. And marketing really is everything when it comes to creating a successful organization. When you think Virgin, in terms of company, you think high quality, classy, it's got a good image. And that message runs through all its products, regardless of what he's selling. The next one is Jo Malone. So Jo Malone is a perfumer and business tycoon. She founded Jo Malone London, the perfume company, and recently Jo Loves. Now, she grew up on a council estate, heavily dyslexic, and she had to work for her family in like a small store, and it was financial difficulties. She had to bring up her sister. She had to miss school. She was much of a grafter, but she realized that she actually had an exceptional nozzle. She had a really, really, really good sense of smell. And she thought, you know what, I'm going to use this. So she started creating perfume, selling it, making it really big. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And with the help of her husband, she was able to create this massive organization. And it's successful because of the passion she put into it. And I can't really contribute great sense of smell and dyslexia, but what I will say is there is definitely a link when it comes to other neurodivergent conditions and heightened senses. Things like autism, people tend to be highly perceptive to certain types of like sensory information. Now, the great thing I like about this is, like I said, dyslexia doesn't just teach you to think outside of the box. It also teaches you resilience, because in business, it isn't just up, up, up. It's up, down, up, down, up, down. So with Jo, unfortunately, she got cancer and she was like, this is the end. Amazingly, she recovered from it. But one of the one of the big downsides of it is she actually lost her sense of smell, and she didn't feel that she could stay in this industry anymore. So she decided to leave, and she sold it. She got rid of it. She actually doesn't really have anything to do with Jo Malone London anymore. Unfortunately, well, maybe a good thing, her smell came back, but now she doesn't have a company. So rather than just kind of sit and live with her millions of pounds, she keeps on grafting, and then she creates Jo Loves. And she had to wait 5 years for this because she had like a clause in her contract, which means she couldn't do a competitor. But she kind of stayed at it. She honed in her skills, and she's starting over again. And this thing, people with dyslexia tend to be non-quitters. They seem to be like go on and on and on. Kick a dog when it's down, but these dogs are going to keep getting back up, whether or not reading is one of their key assets. A terrible analogy, but you kind of get the point. So a quote from Jo says, my dyslexia is not a disability, but an ability to think differently. And if this world needs anything at the moment, it's people who can think differently. Her perfumes are probably one of the best because she was able to use her unique abilities to make something which speaks for itself. It's interesting that someone who struggled with reading ended up relying on another sense and allowed that sense to really home in on it. She used her sense of smell rather than her vision in order to decode information. I think that's a pretty interesting kind of viewpoint. The next kind of key thing I want to look at is keeping it simple. We already mentioned this from Richard Branson on how dyslexics can take a complex situation or problem and get it down to its bare bones. People sometimes look at dyslexia like it's dumb or stupid condition because we end up talking in a simpler vocabulary. We might not use as extensive language when we write. But actually, there's a pros to this because, you know, when you kind of got to write information down and you're like, I can't think of the word to write, so you end up using a simpler word. That could be seen as a negative in an academic sense. But in the real world, where messaging is everything, it's actually a massive, massive strength. And that's one thing you'll see about dyslexia. It isn't so much a weakness overall, but a weakness in certain settings. But in other settings, the exact same qualities can be massive strengths. So I just noticed, before I go on to Nick Jones, who I think is a really interesting case study, I will actually pass it over to Matt if you're ready to kind of jump in.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. So the reason why I wanted Matt to join today is, yes, it's great showing all these super ridiculously successful dyslexic entrepreneurs, and they have done great. But let's be real, they seem so untouchable, like so unreachable, where Matt, who is a dyslexic entrepreneur, has founded exceptional individuals. Is it currently like taking over the world? Maybe not just, well, he says, yeah, I say not yet, but it will be, but it is growing, it's progressing. So I'd love to know, Matt, if you could just tell us your journey with exceptional individuals through why you founded it, the motivations, and how you think dyslexia played a part in where you are today.
Yeah, I think, hi everyone first. So for me, the dyslexia part of it was very important because of the barriers that I faced getting into traditional workplaces. So those recruitment processes that can exclude especially dyslexic people with application forms, aptitude tests, psychometric tests. All it took was for me to get one spelling wrong, not quite understand a question, and then I'd be excluded from the process. I've always wanted to start an organization. I guess that comes in with the dyslexia, that different way of thinking and that creativity side. And that combined with the challenges that I was facing is why I launched Exceptional Individuals. So it was a bit of my own desire to do so, but also contributing there was society and the norms that neurodiverse people have to face when applying for work that actually inspired me to go on and do that. I think it's just a bit of a coincidence that the organization that I founded supports people with dyslexia and other neurodiversities, of course, but I think it was always going to be something. It just turned out to be this. And like a lot of the people you're covering today, I'm sure they've got similar stories of coming up against challenges and fails, and that was very much the same for me. At school, I didn't have any support for my dyslexia, and I was quite not ashamed of it, but I didn't really want people to know. I wanted to be outside playing football or doing any other kind of sport. I didn't want to be in a classroom learning just because of the way I process information. I find that particularly difficult, especially reading from a whiteboard or sending people long emails. I much prefer to do voice notes and communicate a bit differently. It wasn't until I got to university and found out about some of the people that Nat's talking about today, those other entrepreneurs, that was an inspiration for me to stay at uni, do the business course, and I did new enterprise and social enterprise at uni and economics, and that combined was kind of the inspiration for starting EI. Is there anything else you want me to cover, Nat?
No, I think that's really interesting. I like the point when you didn't really intend to create exceptional individuals. It's that it was an opportunity that you saw and the dyslexia kind of formed and created it. But were there any things, some of the things we were looking at previous people, is that things that were a disability or a disadvantage in your like old academic life in school is now actually a strength? Have you kind of noticed that things were considered a disability before are now actually something which is very useful to creating organizations?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the disability piece. I think for me, I was always friends with my teachers because I didn't want to do the written work. So I saw the teachers as an opportunity to build relationships, speak to them on a day-to-day, and not quite get on first name terms with them, but I would see them outside of school and we would have a conversation, whereas a lot of my peers saw them as the enemy. And I think dyslexia played into that a lot because I was just finding different ways to communicate. So the way they wanted me to communicate in this written form or doing essays or whatever just wasn't my strength there. So building that skill up and building relationships and speaking to other people was definitely something that has grown and is now an asset. Whereas at school, it was, I'd be getting told off for that. I would be getting detentions or whatever just from speaking to my peers. It's just because I was avoiding doing that written work so much. And yeah, other bits would be that kind of bigger picture thinking that we often hear around dyslexia and having the solutions, not quite knowing the details to those solutions. And that's why for me, having an amazing team that can help fill in those bits at school and in my academic life, again, that was a real challenge because I knew what the answer often was to the question, but explaining it and writing about how I'd get there was a real big challenge. Whereas now, definitely an asset, I think.
Okay. And another thing is, say if you were, a lot of people wonder, okay, I know dyslexics have all these great skills, but I don't really know where to begin. Do you have any advice for people on where to start when it comes to like looking for an idea?
I think for me, and one thing I've learned when we've been part of incubators and business incubators and been in office of business incubators, it's really hard with the idea side because sometimes you're searching for the something and there's no lived experience of that problem. And you don't always have to have lived experience. I'm talking about a social enterprise world here. But I think it's so important because you can relate to the people you're supporting, you know what the challenge is, and also you're probably the best place to know what the solution is as well. So for me, when starting and looking at startups and what I want to do next, I'm always thinking about what is it in my life right now that relates to me, as opposed to trying to search for problems that I don't have any ideas about. And that can be with products and services as well. Just things that are affecting me in my daily life. I think that's where I was best placed to start and find a solution through exceptional individuals or a business idea. So rather than searching for a problem, just look at like internally itself and look at those day to day, from brushing your teeth in the morning to going to bed at night. What are the things that you are finding challenging that maybe you could find something as a solution to those challenges, be it a service, a product, whatever it might be. And that's what's always kept me in the right direction. That makes sense.
Thanks. And I think one last question, which I think would be really interesting for everyone, is that one recurring quality that we're seeing from a lot of entrepreneurs who are dyslexic is when it comes to delegation. So we know about the spiky profile, how people with dyslexia have really high skills and things that aren't their strength, but those differences seem to be quite severe. So we tend not to be great all-rounders, but we might be better at finding someone else who is able to do that role. I'm interested to know about where EI is currently, how your decision to step down as CEO, but kind of continue in an innovation sector, and why you decided to go that route.
Yeah, I think, and this isn't for all entrepreneurs. I'm scared of, this is my experience, right? For me, knowing my strength areas, but also knowing what I'm not so good at and knowing my challenges is really important for me to try it once. I have to do to firstly just to understand the processes, but being aware of my, what's the word I'm looking for, limitation is really, really important. And I've never been too worried about giving other people that are much better than me in those spaces with a completely different skill set or a similar skill set, but are more effective in that area. I've never shied away from handing work over and delegating in that area. And I think you hear that story, neurodiverse entrepreneurs or not, where lots of people will do that. But you do get those serial entrepreneurs, right? Like Elon Musk of the world and Richard Branson's you might have touched on today, who are obsessed with finding solutions themselves to almost everything. But I know they do a lot of delegating as well. And for me, it was an easy decision when I felt like I wasn't the right person to lead the organization forward, to find someone else to step in and do that.
I think that's a really great quality, and that's definitely one that we've seen throughout. With Richard Branson, who we've already covered, he had, well, I think we said he had 400 companies he currently control, and obviously he can't manage all of them, so he delegates to the right person. But where he thrives is in the innovation inside. So he knows the strengths, he knows the weaknesses, and it all started from one brand, Virgin Media. So who knows, you might end up creating exceptional media, exceptional brides, exceptional airplanes. It could go in any direction.
Yeah, the bridal sector is the next one.
I say that because Richard Branson literally has his own bride company.
Fantastic.
He does brides, he does hot air balloons, he does condoms, he does newspapers, he does everything. So cool. Exceptional ...
Yeah.
All right, well, Matt, we'll let
Now, can I just add to that? And my name's Danny Ireland, I'm the CEO, and Matt's brought me in. And I think it's also, there's a lot of bravery to get an organisation as far as Matt has, and he's inspiring me, even after a 40-year career in commercial world. I'm inspired that he's brave enough to let someone like me in to help him, support him. But we've also hung on to his coattails to make sure that as chair, he influences the forward growth of the business as well. And that's from that creativity. So I think it's a good balance between the commercial perspective of scaling up the business. However, Matt is still the leader from a creative perspective of where the next opportunity is going to be. So I think it's a great, great strength to be able to do that when you've built something for 7 or 8 years.
Thanks for that, Danny. And I think that is also a really good point, how you can delegate, but you can still shape how something grows and develops. Like Richard Branson, even when he sells his company, if it's got the Virgin name or brand, it still has his ethos, his views, what got on there. But anyway, Matt, I'll let you get back to your busy life, or feel free to stay. But thanks for speaking with us.
No problem. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to jump off because I've got another call very shortly.
Nice. All right, so I hope you'll find that really interesting. I definitely did. Having like a real life example just brings it to life so much more. But I do want to go through some other big examples because...
Can I sorry to Nat.
Go for it.
I'm just going to interrupt now. I'm going to ask, do you know people who are part of the neurodiverse? Do you find most of them, actually, I think probably all of them, don't do well at school? Because I never did well at school.
Unfortunately so, but then you've got examples like Matt, who say he actually liked school. I think, who else? Jamie or Richard Branson, some of those, they liked school as well. So there's a difference between, liking and finding it difficult. I think nearly all neurodiverse individuals found school difficult.
Nat, Fasan, I'll just give you a background. I'm also the chair of a charity that helps families and we support families with neurodivergent children. And what we find is the spike of brilliance, they may be brilliant at, say, maths as an example, but because the Ofsted curriculum is so neurotypical that you've got to be good in a number of different areas, that becomes then the challenge, and therefore that confidence is knocked, and even the spike of brilliance then becomes challenged. So that's some of the experience we find, that you can't put neurodivergent children into the structure that Ofsted has got at the moment in schools. And that's something that we're working on at the moment to say, well, what alternative offerings can you get to complement mainstream schooling or support that individual in education? It may well be they've got a different educational need rather than what's just in the pure Ofsted curriculum.
I'm glad you clarified that, because I think it's an important point. Neurodiverse people aren't bad at school, they're bad at the education system. So we all, you might be really great in some subjects. A great example, I love science, but I wasn't really allowed to go in a high set in science because I was bad at maths and English. Now I'm doing a neuroscience master's, but I wasn't even allowed to do physics in school. So you see how the system sets you up for failure. But if you're able to keep that motivation going post-education, you're far more likely to find your niche. Unfortunately, it can destroy people's self-esteem. And it's no surprise that I think over 50% of the prison population are believed to be dyslexic. So you tend to go one way or the other.
So can I just say, from what you're saying, Danny, are you saying that someone who's like given the, you know, when they go to the college, the school subject, like for example, maths, they find that they're good at, very good at algebra, for example, but they're not good at everything else. So that on that level, they're not academically very good at that subject.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, Fazana. It's probably something that we could look at to do a webinar further down the line. But yeah, it's almost that Ofsted and the school structure ask people to conform to a very, very structured environment. And there's minimum expectancies on every subject. And what actually we see through the charity and other activities that I do at the football club, that the children that are neurodivergent do struggle to conform to everything that's expected of them. And the one or two good areas that have got strengths, their self-esteem, as Nat's just said, and therefore their self-confidence gets knocked. So even what they think they're good at becomes a challenge. And then that's where the anxiety spikes. Then you get non-attendance at school, and the way the schools currently deal with that is on a performance issue. Now, there's some really great school send teams, and I've experience of that, so I'm not going to knock them all. However, they're not funded and they're not structured to help the number of neurodivergent children we've got at school. And this is what you see, and let's get it back on track, that a lot of the entrepreneurs have spikes of brilliance in certain areas, and as Matt said, absolutely inspirational. And I didn't say that just because he was here, I say that because that's the truth. His spikes of brilliance needs complementing by people like myself and the team around us, so that we can support Matt's entrepreneurial creativity. At school, that structure isn't there.
Right, I'm with you. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, and it knocks your whole confidence because you don't fit this box, and you don't fit, what's been said. And yeah, I know what you're saying. I totally agree with that, and it really upsets you in some way.
And,
yeah,
and that's, sorry, Fazana, to cut you across there. Yeah, and that is the worst thing you can do for someone that's neurodivergent, is to knock their confidence in what they believe is a strength. Therefore, they've got nothing to rely on. Anxiety spikes, you get into a recluse position, and it's a downward spiral.
Yeah, and you don't want to come to school, you think, no one seems to understand you.
Yeah,
it's a difficult one. Yeah, I know the feeling. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you both for those views. And I think those thoughts are echoed amongst all these people. It's tough out there, but this is why encouraging people to get over that first hurdle is so important. And this brings me nicely to Nick Jones, the founder of Soho House. Those are like private member clubs that, for co-working, mingling, chilling. And he saw a need for it. He grew up in, again, not in a particularly nice area, really struggled with reading, wasn't able to pronounce words. And he wasn't even able to join any clubs beforehand. So it's not like he had experience in his sector, but he saw something that he wasn't able to get into, just like a lot of dyslexics see roles that they think they wouldn't necessarily be able to get, and they find innovative ways of kind of breaking that initial door, and it was end up being quite successful. One quote which I particularly like from Nick is, "One great advantage of being dyslexic is simplification." So this continuous theme on breaking things down, making it digestible. And you'll see this when we talk about IKEA, because that was all about simplification. So it's actually a continuous theme here. Simplifying things allow for better decision-making and is a real help when running a company. The next skill is being great at explaining and storytelling. It's one thing to have a simple message and another thing to be able to tell it with passion and to really kind of bring that message home. So IKEA, which I hear some people call it IKEA, it's a great organization, arguably one of the best. And IK came from Ingvar's name, apparently. Yeah, IK. And EA came from the initials of the town he grew up in Sweden. So he struggled with numbers, learning to read. He came from quite a rural place. And then one thing that kind of inspired him was thinking, I struggle with memory. And we know a lot of the time, dyslexia isn't about reading. It's actually about memory retention and being able to recall information. So when he was creating furniture, he named it after memorable Swedish towns and names of individuals. And this allowed him to have like an anchor to a word, so he could easily recall names rather than just having 010293. And that has become one of the unique selling points of IKEA now. So something which was a strategy for overcoming how the industry was at that time is now something which is seen as like the go-to. He also made sure that all his instructions were pictures, and that was very intentional as well. How can we make things easy, simple, inclusive for everyone, regardless of whatever your background is? For a dyslexic who visually sees the world, this makes perfect sense, and it has become an iconic part of IKEA's appeal. So I think IKEA is a great example where dyslexia wasn't just something that had to be overcome. It was something which is embedded in the DNA of the company and has led to its success in a major way. He has been incredibly charitable. He's very humble. He's no longer around, sadly, but he was very humble, and he was always kind of solving problems. For instance, I want people to say in my store, well, they're hungry, let's give food in the store. Or someone was trying to get one of his chairs in a car, and they took the legs off and put it in the boot. And he was like, that's not a bad idea. What about if we do flat pack furniture and people assemble it at home? That was crazy at the time, but it was innovative. And I think Jamie Oliver, who we'll talk about in a minute, says you should always contribute about 10% of your revenue to mistakes. 10% of your money should be used for practicing, for failing, for doing ideas that are so crazy they might just work. And that is probably which all of these entrepreneurs have had in common. They haven't been scared to put their money on the line for something which may or may not work. So quickly, some dyslexic strengths. What are some of the continuous strengths that you are seeing throughout these stories from what Matt said, which you think is building this massive pool of neurodiverse entrepreneurs that we have?
Very determined to succeed.
Completely agree. Determination seems to be something that runs through all of these individuals, and it seems like nothing's going to stop them.
Very passionate. They're passionate, and they're willing to give it the 100%. I mean, I just can't think of any other word. Determination, I think. No,
that's perfect. We've also got focus, keeping things simple, problem solving. I mean, keeping things simple is a theme that I found doing this research, and it wasn't the one that came to my mind at the beginning. Originally, it was, thinking outside of the box, creativity, but actually just taking something and thinking, how can I do this easier, simpler? There's I want to say this is a Bill Gates thing. I might be quoting it wrong, but they always say the best employee you could ever ask for is a lazy employee, because they'll always find shortcuts to doing the same thing easier. And it's a really good way of looking at it. People who cut corners will always find a quicker, cheaper, easier way of doing something. So something which could be seen as a negative can actually be a positive. The next one I want to quickly talk about before we run out of time is passion and curiosity. People with dyslexia are super passionate. When they find something that works for them, they will go all in. They realize that there's so many things that they've tried and not worked for their brain type, but they find something, they're all in it. And they're curious to find out why, always asking the questions. Another quote from Nick, and this was from from Made by Dyslexia, which is a great organization who has a lot of ambassadors, said, to be successful in business, you need to get your P's in the right order. And dyslexia helps with that. First, passion. Second, great people. Third, great product. Then profit will follow. It's not the 3 Ps that we use at Exceptional Individuals, but it's close enough. And it really hits home how with dyslexics and with most business, it's about putting the people first, or the passion, the reason that drives you. And I believe the last one is being a networker. Yeah, we might not be the best when it comes to pen and paper, but we can talk the talk. Dyslexics tend to be really good verbal communicators and typically start off in sales positions. And sales is probably one of the best jobs you could ever do for a short amount of time, because it teaches you complete grit and determination. If you're not used to rejection, do sales. And eventually you'll get such a used to rejection that it won't even faze you. And you'll be happy for that successes. And you'll say, well, I succeeded this amount of times, rather than talk about the times that you found difficult. When I first started at EI, and I had no experience in sales whatsoever, for the first 6 months, I didn't make a single pound, and I was expected on bringing money in every single month. And I didn't know that that was completely normal. And I was so ready to give up. But at the last 6 months, I made one sale. And you know what? I think it was only for £500, but then I felt confident and I just went in. And I think a few days after making my first 500, I was able to make, I think, 12,000 for the company. So it does show you how that perseverance, that determination does work. Now, I stuck at that job because I knew that with me having so many neurodiverse conditions, me finding another job isn't going to be easy. And I did not want to put myself through that. So are we determined? Absolutely. But why we're determined, it could be just through being grateful to have an opportunity, because we know how tough it is out there. So Jamie Oliver is one of the best networkers ever. He's actually like ridiculously well off. You know him from TV and being in like a naked chef, but he has his fingers in many pies, pardon the pun. He's a top chef, household name, restaurant owner, and he has a crazy big net worth. Now, what I like about Jamie Oliver is he has failed dramatically recently. I think in 2019, he lost all his businesses. But that wasn't the end of him. He's decided he's been rebuilding, pushing it, and now he is still doing amazingly well with his cooking equipment, his online appeal. He's got different apps, he's got book deals, and he also has companies all around the world that he has franchised. So he is continuously innovating. So out of his 70 organizations, which are outside of the UK at the moment, I think he's still rebuilding them up in the UK at the moment since the big crash. But out of his 70, which one of these have you heard of? We've got Jamie's Italian, Jamie's Pizzeria, Deli. And it's interesting because a lot of these companies came about from networking, through speaking to people. He's traveled the world and he spoke to people about recipes. He spoke to people who didn't have very good English, wasn't able to write for whatever reason. Maybe it was dyslexia, maybe it wasn't. And he took those verbal stories and put them in a format that was accessible for everyone. So another great example of how dyslexia wasn't the thing that held him back, but was the thing that really pushed him forward. I won't play it now, but I'll put it in the chat when we do the editing for this. But Jamie Oliver has a really good interview also made by Dyslexia, and he's a great advocate for them as well. So a few key things which I think has made dyslexic entrepreneurs really thrive is strong imagination, being able to see what hasn't been seen before, reasoning skills, being able to weigh up pros and cons and knowing where to put their resources, communication. How can you get other people to believe in your vision? If you know that you have high and low spikes and you know those low spikes aren't going to be your thing that you can thrive in, you need to get other people on board. You need to be able to delegate. And connecting is a real key skill. How can you bring people together and keep that communication going? So a quick one. Out of all these, what is the percentage, do you think, of self-made millionaires? So out of the self-made millionaires in the world, what percentage out of 100 do you think are dyslexic? And April says, many years ago, I remember going to Jamie Oliver's burger place near Piccadilly Circus. I can't remember if it was a Jamie Diner or if it had another name. I've only been to Jamie Italian, but it was very nice. So the correct answer is, in fact, 40. 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic. That's a really, really high number. So yes, we're nearly just as likely kind of to be millionaires as we are to go to prison. It's interesting, isn't it? The disproportionate amount. Well, I'm not going to say I'm nearer to being a prisoner, but I'm definitely not a millionaire just yet. So we will see. Now, last of all, a few, in terms of dyslexics' net worth, I won't go into great detail because we're nearly out of time. But the richest, most successful business person of all time was dyslexic, and that is Henry Ford. Henry Ford, who created Ford Motors, He saw a problem and he solved it numerous times. He didn't just create the automobile, he created a production line in order to create them in mass markets. And he wasn't complacent on creating something and just sitting back. He created it and he innovated and he innovated and he innovated again. So Henry Ford, what a don. Probably the most successful person in history. And his name is still living on and he is still a complete badass. Also, he was a racing car driver, which I was learning while doing this. We got Walt Disney, another amazing mind, an amazing, amazing delegator. Yes, he was a good artist, but he was far better at getting other people to believe in his vision. Steven Spielberg, a renowned filmmaker, maybe he struggled communicating in written word, but he was a great storyteller. In The Dragon's Den, majority of the dragons in the UK were dyslexic, which is really interesting. So out of this list, no, it wasn't Deborah. Let's see, it was, actually, it was Theo Petitis and Peter Jones. They are both dyslexic. And interestingly, in the American equivalent, Shark Tank, 50% of the sharks are dyslexic. So more and more examples. Charles Schwab, who was an incredibly successful investment banker, he was always able to talk the talk. And if you go in a meeting, he would always know everything about the subject he was talking about, but he couldn't read textbooks. He never did any research. He wasn't able to follow along in school. So how did he learn these skills? He taught himself via comic books by looking at images and graphic novels. So if anyone tells you what reading comics is a waste of time, this is a great example of someone who found an alternative way of digesting the same information and he was able to retain it better. He would say in college and stuff, he wouldn't be able to write any notes because he couldn't read his writing and it wouldn't make sense. But he would borrow his friend's notes and he would be able to retain it completely and he would smash his exams. So he was good in education later on in life, but he had to find a different way of smashing it than most people. Ted Turner, another great example, one of the person who created the first 24-hour news channel, absolutely amazing and dyslexic. William Hewlett of Hewlett and Packard, who were able to find innovative ways of technology. He has continuously innovated and no sign of stopping. We mentioned Ford, Steve Jobs, some other great examples, a few of these. Another one, which I wish I had more time to go into detail, but was Antia Roddick, who created the Body Shop, Ryan Geyer, who created the Nerf gun. Who doesn't love a good Nerf gun? Mr. Woolworth, who created Woolworths, RIP, but what an organization. The person who created Dole Food. So many great examples. And where some webinars I've struggled to find the examples. So I won't go into much more detail now because I think that was a lot. But what I will say is if you are dyslexic and you do want to start your own business, exceptional individuals can help. So I talk about this every time about how we can get support in the workplace if you have a job. But did you know that even if you run your own business, we can help you? All you need is a business plan, and about 6 months projection. And there are kind of loopholes around that. And you can get support and equipment to start your business. There's also great organizations in the UK like Unlimited, who's one of our partners, who can give grants and funding. And they're always looking out for people who have a really great story and a drive like those with dyslexia usually do. But we're just a bit over, but if there's any questions, now is your time. All right, no questions. I'm going to say that's good for today. But what I will say is, join us next week because we are going to be looking at autistic discrimination. How have people with autism been discriminated in the workplace? And how has that turned out? Not great for employers. So this is an idea of showing you what are your rights? What would happen if you did go to tribunal? Is it worth it? Isn't it worth it? We're going to be looking at this. But I really hope you found this useful and do check out our YouTube channel. We've got so many of these great webinars up, and we also have opportunities on our Facebook page where you can see all the jobs, roles, keep this community going. We've got our LinkedIn community, which is still new but growing. And this is a great place to connect with other like-minded dyslexic entrepreneurs and business people, even intrapreneurs, which are people who innovate within a company. but you can always get in contact with us. I know I rushed the end, but there was a lot to get through, but I hope you found today useful and inspired you to take those ideas and use your dyslexia as an advantage, because there are plenty of examples where that has been the case. This isn't us just, being all peace and love. It's facts. People with dyslexia can be successful and definitely have been. All right, well, thanks everyone, and I'll hopefully catch you next week.